I never expected a dinner table to feel like a war zone until my own flesh betrayed me in front of them. It wasn't the knives that cut deepest that night. It was the laughter. There are mirrors in my hallway I no longer look into. Once, I would pause there, tighten my scarf, check the softness of my smile, adjust the pearls that always seemed too eager to impress. But tonight, as I slipped on my coat, all I saw in the corner of my eye was a flicker of age, a shadow that had taken up residence in my skin, and I told myself not to look too closely. I was going to Meredith's house, my daughter. Her invitation had come wrapped in warmth, or at least the imitation of it. "Dinner with us, Mom." Just a small thing she always said us, as if Michael was sewn into her sentences. Maybe he was. The air was sharp when I stepped outside, autumn biting into my cheeks with the same lack of ceremony Meredith sometimes showed when she kissed them. I drove slowly, not because of the roads, because of the wait. I don't like arriving early to my own judgment. Her house was lit like something out of a Pottery Barn catalog, cozy, curated, clinical. Inside, the fireplace was lit, the wine already opened. The warmth was physical, but not emotional. Michael opened the door and grinned that politician's grin, the one that said, "I tolerate you in curated doses." "Evening, Helen," he said, stepping back without touching me, looking festive. I wasn't. I had worn navy wool and a simple brooch. Nothing about me was festive, but I smiled. "Smells lovely in here," I offered, voice steady. There was rosemary and garlic in the air. I remember because it mixed bitterly with what came next. Meredith came in from the kitchen, apron speckled, cheeks flushed with the performance of domesticity. "There she is," she said, as if I had just emerged from backstage. Her eyes skimmed over me like I was a museum piece, one she wasn't sure she wanted to claim. Dinner was set. Lamb roast, green beans, mashed sweet potatoes with pecans. The good china. I sat down across from her, folded my napkin neatly, smiled when appropriate. I've always been good at appearances. We began eating. Small talk bounced between courses. Work, traffic, the rising cost of eggs. And then it came. Quiet, casual, cruel. "You know, Mom," Meredith said, reaching for the salt, "when you frown, your face crinkles like parchment. You should really try Botox. Just a little. Michael says the girls at his office swear by it." Michael chuckled. That sharp, half-swallowed laugh men do when they're pretending not to enjoy a joke too much. He didn't look at me, just kept slicing his lamb. The room fell silent for a moment, or maybe it was just me. The sound left my ears like someone had pulled a velvet curtain over them. My fork trembled slightly in my hand, but I didn't put it down. Crinkles like parchment. Parchment holds history, love letters, final testaments, sacred vows, but she said it like I was decay, like I was old paper, crumbling, yellow, in need of smoothing out or throwing away. I swallowed my bite slowly, careful not to let my hands show the tremor that had begun in my elbows. "Parchment, I said, forcing a small laugh. "I suppose that's better than leather." Meredith giggled, relieved, as if my willingness to banter meant no harm had been done. But a part of me had shifted in that moment, a silent crack in a dam that had held firm for decades. Do they know how many nights I spent sewing her clothes when we couldn't afford new ones? Do they remember how I worked double shifts at the clinic when she needed braces? When Michael was out of work for 4 months, I brought over groceries without ever saying a word. I raised a daughter who once clutched my leg in fear of the dark. Now she shrinks away from the shadows on my face. After dinner, I helped clear the plates, even though she didn't ask. She offered me coffee, but not with warmth, with obligation. I said no, thank you, and collected my coat from the banister. Michael didn't look up from his phone when I left. Meredith hugged me lightly, her arms barely touching mine. "Drive safe, okay?" she said. I nodded. My throat was full of unsaid things. When I returned home, I didn't turn the lights on right away. I stood in the foyer in the hush of my old house and let the silence wrap around me like a shawl. I took off my coat slowly, slipped off my shoes. The mirror in the hallway watched me. I turned toward it. This time I looked. Wrinkles spidered from the corners of my eyes along the sides of my mouth. My cheeks sagged slightly, the softness of time pulling them down. But there was something else, too, a firmness around the jaw, a steady fire in my eyes. My mother once told me, "Don't chase youth. Let age find you with grace and grit." Meredith's words circled like vultures. Parchment, Botox, laughter. My hand curled into a fist without thinking. There is something sacred about knowing when to draw a line. My entire life, I've given grace, bit my tongue, smiled through disrespect. But as I stood there, listening to the ticking of the hallway clock, I realized something had hardened inside me. Not bitterness, clarity. If she wanted to laugh at the lines on my face, she could live without what those lines built. The money, the house, the savings, the security I sacrificed so much to preserve. I raised a daughter, but I would not let her mock the hands that held her first breath. I walked into my study, opened the drawer where my will sat folded in neat precision, and whispered to the silence, I would never show them my softness again. I stared at my reflection that night and wondered, when did the lines on my face outshine the woman beneath them? I used to see fire in my eyes. Now I saw a map of sacrifices, and none of them led home. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay still in my bed, beneath a quilt I stitched 30 years. Ego when my hands were surer, faster, less burdened by tremor or time. The house creaked around me. Old wood, older silence. I used to love how this place breathed. Now it exhaled memories I was too tired to chase. The sky outside shifted from ink to pearl, and light began to slide slowly through the slats in my blinds. Soft and pitiless. I rose before the sun fully declared itself. My knees ached in that loyal way they always do, as if reminding me that even pain has perfect attendance. I padded down the hallway in slippers that had grown too familiar, toward the mirror in my bedroom, larger than the hallway one framed in oak, married to memory. I stood before it. No lights, just dawn. That face. Mine. Still. But not. The wrinkles weren't just there, they were insistent. Each one a raised voice. The deep marionette lines down the sides of my mouth, the sag under my chin. The folds that made it look like my eyes were always squinting in disappointment. And yet, beneath them, I saw someone I hadn't properly looked at in decades. "You're still here," I whispered to her. And she was. Beneath the folds and the creases and the soft gathering of years, she was there. The girl who once wore lipstick to bed. The young wife who swore never to speak like her mother. The mother who could carry a child and a bag of groceries and 1,000 unsaid words without breaking. She was still here. But Meredith hadn't seen her. In that moment, my daughter's voice echoed like a whip crack. "You look like parchment." And his laugh. God, his laugh. Michael's smug, detached noise that made me feel like I was nothing more than entertainment on their perfectly set table. My throat tightened, not with tears, with knowing. I'd raised Meredith with every drop of grace I had. I taught her how to hold herself, how to speak kindly, how to survive grief. When her father died, it was me who held her up while I crumbled in private. I paid for her first apartment, co-signed her second. I was the one who taught her the power of words, and now she used them like weapons. Casual, thoughtless, dipped in sarcasm, sheathed in a smile. I turned from the mirror. The room felt colder than before. The study sat waiting. I walked into it like I was stepping into a confession booth. The air still smelled faintly of old paper and cedar. My husband's scent, long faded but still anchored in the grain of the desk. I stood there for a long moment. My hand hovered over the drawer. I'd thought about updating my will before, quietly, abstractly. But last night, something clicked. Was it petty? Maybe. But it wasn't just about pride. It was about legacy, about respect, about the dangerous way laughter can make you feel like a stranger in your own story. My fingers curled around the drawer handle and pulled. The folder sat there. Navy blue, embossed with gold letters. I had kept it neat, pristine, updated it just a year ago when I thought I might have to go in for surgery. I brought it to the desk, sat down. The chair groaned beneath me, too loud in the silence. As I unfolded the pages, a photo slipped out. I hadn't remembered putting it there. It was old, creased at the corners. Meredith, age 5, on the beach, her hair sticking to her cheeks, her hands covered in sand. I had taken that photo. She'd been crying over a broken shell, and I'd made her laugh by pretending to talk like a crab. I held the photo like it was fragile, like it might turn to dust if I breathed too hard. That girl? She had loved me without condition, without performance. What had changed? No, who had changed? Maybe both of us. A gust of emotion rose sharp and fast through my chest. Guilt, ache, anger braided into one. I pressed the photo gently aside, smoothed the will beneath my hands. The paper was thick, expensive, unforgiving. I thought of Gloria, my oldest friend, dead now, 4 winters past. Her daughter hadn't even come to the funeral. I remembered how Gloria cried in my kitchen, said she should have left something for the neighbor's son instead. At least he checked in on me, she'd whispered, clutching her tea like it was the last warm thing in her life. I had promised myself I would never die disappointed, and yet I could still smell the lamb from last night, clinging to the fibers of my coat in the corner, still feel the polished sting of my daughter's laughter turning cold in my hands. I looked down at the last page, the beneficiaries, Meredith's name, typed clean, unblemished. My hand trembled toward the pen. Was this revenge? Number. This was clarity. Legacy should not be given out of duty. It should be earned through love. If I left this world tomorrow, would she mourn me or just manage the estate? The pen rolled between my fingers, kissed the line beside her name. I hesitated. The air seemed to hush, the room holding its breath with me. My pulse tapped like Morse code beneath my skin. I clicked the pen open. Its tip hovered above the page, black ink poised like judgment. And then, without letting myself blink, I began to write. I picked up my fountain pen, imagining every shaky loop of ink as a small revenge. Not loud, not cruel, just permanent. The kind of silence that leaves bruises. The pen sat cold in my fingers, a slender thing of black enamel and brass. Gerald gave it to me on our 25th anniversary, a gift wrapped in soft velvet and weightless intentions. I remember he said, "Use it to write something worth keeping." I never imagined I'd use it to erase. The will's paper was heavy, thick like promise. My name etched at the top, my legacy splayed in bulletproof print. And there, just beneath the section labeled heirs and beneficiaries, her name stared back at me. Meredith Lane Cartwright. Perfect. Immaculate. Unbothered. My fingers gripped tighter. Somewhere in the kitchen, the radiator hissed softly, like the house was trying to shush me. I heard the ticking of the wall clock 2 rooms over, each tick a heartbeat, each beat an accusation. I hadn't crossed her name out yet. I hadn't dared. Instead, I sat there, pen uncapped, ink ready, and memories flooding like an ambush. She used to braid my hair when I was sick. The image came unbidden. Meredith at 10, her fingers trembling with clumsy affection as she sat behind me on the couch, weaving my hair into crooked braids because "You look like a warrior this way, Mommy." That was the year Gerald was in and out of the hospital. That was the year she stopped sleeping through the night unless her small hand was wrapped around mine. I blinked it away. Last night, that same hand had lifted a wine glass and passed judgment with a grin. "You look like parchment." My throat went dry again. I stared at her name, a name I had spoken more than any other in my life, a name I had once whispered into fevered dreams and shouted across playgrounds and written 1,000 times on birthday cards and lunch notes. And now I was about to strike it. I pressed the pen down. But I didn't write. Not yet. Because guilt, the ever-patient guest, sat down across from me. Was I doing this to teach her a lesson? Was this spite masquerading as justice? Was it my pride that wanted to make her feel small, or was this self-preservation? I leaned back and looked toward the window. Outside, the world was thick with fog, the kind that turns trees into ghosts and rooftops into whispers, the kind of weather that makes you doubt what's real. My legacy. What would it mean if it passed to someone who thought my face was a punchline? What would she do with it? Renovate the house? Flip the property? Laugh about the old woman who died bitter and alone? Number. I wouldn't let my life's work become a footnote in someone else's dinner story. But then, another memory. Meredith at 18, trembling as she handed me the acceptance letter from Columbia, her eyes glassy, her voice tight. "I can't afford it unless you," and I had. I drained the savings Gerald left me, sold a pendant my grandmother gave me. I told her I wanted to do it. Because I did. Because when you love someone, you bleed without keeping score. But now, I looked back at the will. If I crossed her name out, I wasn't just severing money, I was cutting legacy. Family, bloodline. I imagined a future dinner, a holiday, the chair across from me empty. Or worse, filled with someone else, a stranger who looked like her, but didn't carry her softness or her sharp tongue. I saw myself, older, more fragile, wrapped in a shawl at Thanksgiving, carving a turkey alone, pretending the silence was peace. And I saw her face, older too, perhaps hardened, sitting across town at a table I was never invited to, smiling without me. The vision stung, burned. Still, the other memory lingered louder. The dinner just last night, that dismissive flick of her wrist, that chuckle, that indifference. I picked up the pen again. The weight felt different now, like a verdict. I whispered to the empty room. "You drew first blood, Meredith." The pen's nib met paper, not a scratch, not a violent cross, just a slow, deliberate line through her name. Once, twice, clean, surgical, permanent. The ink bled slightly into the thick fiber of the page, feathering out like a bruise. The name was still visible, but blurred now. Disqualified. Removed. I signed the margin beside it. Then I sat back. There was no triumph in me. No joy. Only a kind of tired calm. Like after you've cleaned a wound, but before it starts to heal. The pen rolled from my fingers and clinked onto the floor, but I didn't reach for it. I just stared at the crossed-out name and whispered, "There's no turning back now." I had erased her from my will, but erased her from my heart. That choice echoed older, darker moments. And once echoes start, you can't always control what they bring back with them. The silence after crossing out Meredith's name didn't feel victorious. It felt stale. Like the stillness of a room just after a shout, or the moment after a slammed door, when everything still trembles, but no one comes back. I stayed at the desk longer than I needed to. The pen had rolled onto the floor, but I didn't pick it up. Its final act was complete. It could rest where it fell. My legs eventually pushed me up, slow and stiff. I moved through the house like a ghost, passing photographs I didn't dare meet the eyes of. The ceramic bowl she made in 6th grade, still chipped and crooked, holding old keys by the door. Every object in this place had her fingerprints on it. I paused at the window and stared into the fog-covered yard. A squirrel darted across the back fence, its feet kicking up frost from the railing. I found myself wishing I could run that fast, run past memory, past guilt, past motherhood. But guilt doesn't let you run. It walks right behind you, barefoot and patient. A sudden image flickered through my mind, years ago, a Tuesday evening, dim and gray. I had just lost Gerald, and I was in bed, curled toward the wall, the weight of his absence pressing into my lungs. I hadn't eaten that day. I remember the door creaking open. Then the sound of Meredith's voice, quiet and 12. I made grilled cheese. I didn't burn it this time. I had pretended to be asleep. But she came anyway, set the plate on the nightstand, and stood there, just breathing. I could hear her breathing. Then she whispered, "I'll eat it if you don't want to." I just didn't want you to be hungry. The sound of her feet padding back to the kitchen still echoed in my chest. I never said thank you. Back then, grief made me mute. Now it made me stupid. I leaned against the glass, breath fogging a circle into it. My daughter, my only child, the one I used to carry against my chest, her head tucked under my chin like a heartbeat I could hold. Was I punishing her for one cruel moment? Was I ignoring all the others? I walked back to the kitchen, opened the pantry. Empty spaces where cereal used to be, coffee. I reached for the tin of loose-leaf Darjeeling, one of my few indulgences, and paused. Folded inside the tin was a scrap of paper I hadn't seen before. It was a receipt. Target dated last week. Adult diapers, glucose monitor, bath safety handles, items I hadn't bought, things I'd told Meredith I didn't need, even though I did. There was a handwritten note at the bottom. I'll start dropping things off at night. She'll refuse if I do it in person. Let her keep her pride. The handwriting was hers. I sank into the kitchen chair, the tin still in my lap, tea leaves spilling across my flannel nightgown like ashes. She'd been buying for me, quietly, privately, letting me believe I was self-sufficient while patching the corners of my life with her own hands. And I had erased her. My eyes blurred. Not from age this time, but from shame. Hot, breathless shame. Was her mocking tone last night just exhaustion? Frustration? Some stupid, unthinking way to keep the pain light? To avoid cracking in front of her husband? Had I mistaken her flinch for a slap? I moved back toward the study, the receipt clutched in my hand. My footsteps slower now, less sure. At the desk, the will lay open, her name still visibly sliced through. Permanent ink, permanent hurt. But for the first time, I felt something shift. Not a tidal wave, a crack, a tiny fissure in the armor I'd built in my pride. The phone buzzed. I jumped. I hadn't realized I'd left it on the charger by the window. The screen lit up. Meredith. My thumb hovered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. Not like this. But before I could set it down, a message popped up. Just one. A single trembling text, raw and unfinished. "Mom, I'm sorry, I love you." My knees gave out beneath me, and for the first time in years, I let myself fall. That text ricocheted in me like a half-heard melody, beautiful but broken. "I'm sorry. I love you." 7 words that should have soothed, but they only deepened the ache. I stayed on the floor longer than I care to admit. My knees throbbed, my elbows dug into the rug, but I didn't move. The phone lay beside me, still glowing with her message. The words just sat there, tiny, fragile things, trying to build a bridge across a chasm I wasn't sure I wanted to cross. Sorry, love. 2 words that always sound cleaner in theory than in practice. I picked up the phone slowly, like it might burn me. My fingers hovered over the screen. The blue bubble waited for a response. A heartbeat, a sign of life. Nothing came. Because I didn't know what forgiveness should feel like. And worse, I didn't know what it should cost. My pride, my resolve, my sense of justice. How much do you have to lose to win someone back? I turned the phone over in my hand, back and forth, like a stone I didn't know whether to skip or keep. Forgiveness had always felt like a private act, something between me and God maybe. But now, It was being requested by the one person who'd made me feel like I didn't matter anymore, like I was a relic. I stood slowly, gripping the edge of the desk. My body creaked, same as the floorboards. We both were tired of carrying weight. I walked to the kitchen and filled the kettle. Steam hissed into the air, curling upward like a question mark. I made tea just to have something to do with my hands. My mind? That was another matter. It kept playing Meredith's voice over and over. 5 years old, 10, 16, 30. All versions of her layered like stained glass, beautiful and fractured. And underneath it all, Michael's laugh. Still there. Still mocking. Like a ribbon tying the insult tight. I carried the mug back to the living room and sat on the couch. The blanket I kept draped there slid into my lap like it knew I needed it. I took a sip. The tea burned, but I welcomed it. A pain I could control. I thought of Gerald. He had died without betrayal, without cruelty. Just gone one day. A sudden storm in the lungs. No time for goodbye. Grief is clean when it's caused by nature. It's the betrayals by the living that leave the mess. Like Gloria, my best friend for over 30 years. We had a tradition. Every New Year's Eve, we'd toast at midnight, even if we weren't in the same place. One year, I sent her a card with a silver ring inside. Nothing fancy, just something I thought she'd like. She sold it, told me months later, said she needed cash. I would have given her money. She didn't need to lie, but she did. That betrayal never fully left me. It sat in my chest like a coin under the tongue, unspoken but always present. Was Meredith becoming another Gloria? Was I bracing myself for betrayal before it arrived? Or worse, was it already here and I just hadn't accepted it? I set the tea down. My hand trembled slightly. I stared at the phone again. Should I text back? Should I leave it unanswered? Make her sit with what she'd done? What if this was her way of reaching for me, and I left her hanging in the dark? But what if she didn't mean it? The words could have been reflex, could have come from Michael's suggestion or guilt, or maybe just convenience. People say sorry all the time and mean none of it. I pressed the phone's side button. The screen went black. Stillness. Then again. The image of her at 10, crying over her goldfish. Me holding her in the bathroom as she whispered, "He was just floating." I didn't know he was dead. The way her tiny hands gripped my sweater like I was the only thing anchoring her to the earth. I was the only thing. And now I didn't know what we were to each other anymore. Mother and daughter, or two aging women talking through layers of armor. The tea had gone cold. I stood again. Paced, stared out the window at the fog that hadn't lifted. My hand went to my phone, like a habit I couldn't quit. I unlocked it. The message was still there, bold and waiting. "Mom, I'm sorry. I love you." I tapped the keyboard icon. The letters blinked up at me, eager to be used, to bridge something, or burn it. I inhaled, but just as my thumbs hovered, Michael's laugh echoed in my ears again, sharp, quick, unbothered. It wasn't just the laugh. It was the way he didn't even look at me when he made it, like I wasn't worth acknowledgement, like I had become a living prop in their life. I stared at the blinking cursor, and though my fingers stayed still, my heart whispered something awful. What if I wasn't forgiving my daughter, but enabling her husband? My phone rang, each ring heavier than the last, like the ticking of some cruel clock. I didn't want to answer it, but I couldn't bear to let it stop either. It rang once. I stared at it. Twice. Still, I didn't move. 3 times. I reached for it. By the 4th ring, it felt less like a call and more like an ultimatum. The shrill sound echoed through my quiet house, slipping under doorways, pulling dust from corners. It rang like it knew everything I hadn't said. I swiped to answer. Hello? Silence. Just the soft breath of someone holding back too much. Then, "Mom?" Her voice was thin, brittle almost, like a child pretending not to cry. I didn't respond right away. let the quiet sit between us like a bruise. I didn't want to just text you, she said. I didn't think that was enough. I could hear something in the background, maybe the hum of her kitchen fan or her pacing on hardwood. I imagined her walking in circles, twisting the phone cord between her fingers like she used to do with her hair as a girl. I got your message, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded older and sharper. I meant it, she whispered. All of it. I closed my eyes, let my breath move slowly through my chest. Then say it again, I said. There was a pause. Then, softer than before, I'm sorry. I love you. I was awful the other night. I don't know why I said that. I think I was just tired and stupid and maybe scared of what? Another pause. Of how fast you're aging. Of how I feel like I don't know how to help you. Of seeing you shrinking and not knowing what to do with that. Her words hit me sideways. I didn't know whether to be comforted or offended. Calling me parchment wasn't exactly a loving tribute. I know, she said. It wasn't meant the way it came out. Michael laughed and I don't even like that laugh. That caught me off guard. What do you mean? She hesitated. Nothing. I just meant I felt stupid and it spiraled, and I tried to laugh it off and I hurt you. I know I did. I looked down at my hand resting on my lap, the veins raised like rivers under fragile skin. You did. I know, she said again, voice cracking. I almost didn't answer this call. I heard her swallow. But you did, she said, hopeful. I'm still deciding whether I should have. She let out a shaky breath. That's fair. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, like a wire humming between us, waiting to spark or snap. I found the receipt, I finally said. The one in the tea tin? You've been sneaking things in. Helping behind my back. You would have said no, she said, half smiling. I could hear it. You always do. I just wanted to make things easier. I sighed. Then why make things harder with your words? I don't know, she said. I think sometimes I get so wrapped up in trying to hold it all together. Michael, the job, the bills. I lash out in places I feel safe. Safe? I repeated, disbelieving. You're the only person I know who'll still be there after the storm, even if I don't deserve it. I didn't answer right away. My throat tightened. You're not a child anymore, I said. You can't throw knives and expect me to catch them without bleeding. I know. I'm trying. Something about her tone made me believe her, or want to. We sat in a long, slow hush again. Then she said, Can I come over? My chest tensed. I didn't know what I was more afraid of, seeing her face or watching it mirror mine. I don't know, I said truthfully. I haven't decided what comes next. Can we figure it out together? There was something vulnerable in her voice I hadn't heard in years. Not weakness, openness. Like the little girl who used to bring me grilled cheese and sit beside me in silence, just so I wouldn't feel alone. Fine, I said after a long breath. But no pretending. If you come here, we talk. Really talk. Not over dinner plates and between performances. No pretending, she echoed. I hung up without saying goodbye. She would know that meant yes. I sat there in the quiet, still as stone. The tea had gone cold again. I didn't mind. Then, footsteps. At first I thought I was imagining them, but no. The sound of gravel crunching, a car door shutting, hurried steps on the porch. Then the front door creaked open. Unlocked, always unlocked. And I heard her familiar footsteps cross the threshold. She was already inside. The doorbell rang, and with each ring my heart thumped in its cage. This was no ordinary visit. It felt like judgment dressed as a daughter, but she didn't wait for me to answer. I heard the door creak open, just like it always had. The sound of her footsteps on the entry rug, the soft click as she placed something, keys, a bag, on the console table. My body froze, but my mouth was already forming the word. Meredith, She appeared in the hallway. Her eyes were red, nose pink at the edges, hair pulled back into a loose bun, tendrils falling around her cheeks like vines trying to hide the cracks. She held a brown paper bag in one hand, the kind used to carry wine, or regrets. "I brought dinner," she said. I didn't move. We stood there for a few seconds, strangers in the familiar. "I wasn't sure you'd open the door," she added. I didn't. That hung in the air, like a curtain neither of us was brave enough to pull back. She offered a small smile, timid. "You still don't lock it." "Always worried someone might need you." "Maybe I'm worried they won't," I said, and regretted the sharpness instantly. Her smile faltered, and she looked down. "Can I come in, or—" "You're already in." She nodded, walked past me into the kitchen, her movements careful, like she didn't want to wake something sleeping. She unpacked the bag. Plastic containers, 2 sets of silverware, napkins. "It's just soup and bread." "Nothing fancy. The cafe near the office still remembers you. I haven't been there in years." "They ask about you." The old woman with the strong opinions and the louder earrings. I didn't laugh, but I didn't scowl either. She placed the containers on the table, glanced toward me. "Eat with me?" Her voice cracked on the last word. I nodded once, slowly. We sat. The table between us looked smaller than usual, as if the silence was shrinking everything around it. She broke her bread. I sipped my soup. The steam rose between us like smoke from a battlefield. "Do you remember the Thanksgiving you burned the turkey?" she asked suddenly. I blinked. "You cried." Dad ordered Chinese food and told us it was tradition in Beijing. I gave her the smallest smile I could manage. "You tried to make cranberry sauce in a mug." She shrugged. "I was 9. Still think it could have worked." We sat with that for a while, the old memories, safe ones without sharp edges. Then I asked it. "Why now?" She didn't pretend to misunderstand. "I think I realized I don't know how to talk to you anymore." "You talked just fine the other night." She winced. "I didn't mean that." "At least, not the way it sounded. How did you mean it?" She pushed her soup away. "I don't know. I think maybe I wanted to hurt you a little." That stung. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because I feel like I'm always failing. At work with Michael. Even with you. Especially with you. And sometimes I look at you and I feel judged." I leaned back. "Judged?" She looked up. "Yeah, like nothing I do is enough. Like I can't live up to the woman who raised me, but I also can't meet her expectations now. That's not fair." "I know," she said, "but feelings aren't fair. And I took it out on you, and I hate myself for that." The tears came quietly, not dramatic. Just 2 sliding streaks down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them right away. "I loved you for most of my life," I said, "and now I'm learning how to be disappointed in you." She looked gutted. "But I'm also learning," I added, "how to be disappointed without letting it poison everything else." She nodded slowly. "That's something." I reached for a napkin and handed it to her. She took it without words. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small box, wrapped in tissue paper. She slid it across the table. I didn't touch it. "What is it?" "Open it." I peeled back the tissue. Inside was a bracelet, silver, simple. The kind she'd seen me wear before arthritis made clasps difficult. "This one has magnets," she said. "Easier on your hands." I traced the curve of it with my finger. It was beautiful in its plainness. "Thank you," I said, barely above a whisper. She smiled, more with her eyes than her mouth. "I don't know if I can fix what I broke." "No one ever does," I replied. "They just have to be willing to hold the broken pieces anyway." She exhaled shakily. We didn't speak for a long while after that. Just sat. The soup went cold again. The bread hardened. But the silence felt different now, less punishing, more like soil. Something might grow from it eventually. I thought for the first time in days that maybe we weren't lost. Just quiet. She stood abruptly. The chair scraped back. I flinched. She reached for her bag too fast, and the glass container inside slipped. It shattered on the floor, and from within the wreckage, something small and shining rolled toward me. A ring. A glass slipped from her hand, scattering memories I thought I had gathered neatly. And somewhere in that crash, I heard the sound of everything we'd been hiding from each other. The ring rolled across the hardwood like it knew where it was going. It spun once at my feet, caught the edge of the rug, and tipped over with a tiny clink. Final, fragile, unmistakable. For a moment, neither of us moved. The broken glass glimmered around it, cruelly beautiful under the kitchen light. Meredith stood frozen above the spill, her eyes locked not on the shards, but on me. I bent slowly, knees protesting, careful not to slice myself on the glistening teeth. I picked up the ring, small, silver, delicately set with a tiny sapphire. It was well worn, not new. Gerald had given me a ring like this once. I remember thinking it looked like a wish you could wear. I looked up at her, still kneeling. "Whose is this?" She opened her mouth, closed it. Her chin trembled. "Meredith?" Her voice was barely audible. "Mine." I rose, steadying myself against the table, setting the ring in my palm. "Are you pregnant?" I asked softly. She laughed, but it was hollow, nothing but breath and disbelief. "I wish." I blinked. "What?" Her shoulders sagged as she knelt beside the glass. She began gathering shards with shaking fingers. "Don't," I said quickly, grabbing a towel and nudging her away. "You'll cut yourself." "I already have," she muttered. I stared at her, really stared. The circles under her eyes, the new lines around her mouth. She looked older than she had last week, weighed down. "Talk to me. I lost the baby," she whispered, staring down at her knees. 7 weeks ago. The words slammed into the room like a door I hadn't seen closing. I sat down slowly, my hand instinctively reaching for hers. She didn't pull away, but she didn't grab on either. "I didn't even tell Michael I was pregnant," she said. "It was too early. I wasn't sure it would. I didn't want to hope." "But you kept the ring?" She nodded. "I found it when I was packing the hospital bag. It reminded me that something could still feel sacred. Even if it didn't last, I swallowed against the knot in my throat. You went through that alone? I thought I could handle it. And then I couldn't. And then it was too late to ask for help without explaining why I didn't earlier." Her voice cracked again. "I wasn't trying to hide it from you. I just couldn't bear to hear your disappointment. You always look at me like I should have it together." I wanted to deny it, but part of me knew she wasn't wrong. I'd spent so many years trying to be unshakable, I hadn't noticed the people around me crumbling. "I'm sorry," I said. She blinked up at me. "For not seeing you. For not asking. For assuming." The tension in her shoulders loosened just enough for her to breathe again. "And that's not all," she said after a beat. "Michael lost his job 3 months ago. They fired half the firm. He hasn't told his father or anyone. He's pretending to still work from home, but he's spiraling." She looked exhausted. "I've been covering everything. Maxed out my credit cards, took out a small loan, cashed out my emergency savings. I even pawned my old camera. The one Dad gave me that felt like a slap. And now we're a month behind on the mortgage. 2 on the car. My student loans went into default again. Everything is slipping. And you're still dropping groceries at my door," I said, the disbelief thick in my chest. "Because I love you," she said, "and because I needed one place in my life to feel like it was standing still. Safe. I thought if I could keep you okay, I'd be okay too." I exhaled slowly. Everything inside me was unraveling. All this time, I thought she was careless, thoughtless. But she was breaking. Quietly, elegantly. Like people do when they've learned to fall in private. I leaned toward her, placed my hand gently on her shoulder. "You should have told me." I didn't want to be a burden, she said, eyes full of tears now. You're my daughter, I whispered. You are never a burden. She nodded quickly, as if nodding would keep the tears from falling. But they did, and I let mine come too. We sat there, mother and daughter, surrounded by cold soup, broken glass, and the weight of things unspoken. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and regret. I didn't ask about Michael's role in all this. Not yet. I could see that unraveling would come later. I squeezed her hand. She finally squeezed back. And then she pulled away. "Wait," she said, her voice suddenly sharp. "What?" Her eyes locked onto mine, panic rising behind them. "Mom, the will." I felt my chest tighten. "What about it? You didn't, please tell me you didn't remove me." The room shrank. She covered her mouth with her hand. "Mom," she said, her voice hollow with disbelief, "you shouldn't have removed me from the will." She uttered it so quietly that I wondered if the walls had whispered it. "You shouldn't have removed me from the will." But it wasn't an accusation. It was heartbreak, folded into fact. I didn't answer her right away. I couldn't. The words hung between us like smoke from a fire we both thought we'd already put out. She stood there, framed in the light from the kitchen window, her hand still pressed to her chest as though it might hold in everything spilling out of her. "You did, didn't you?" she asked again, and this time her voice didn't shake. It was calm. Too calm. I nodded. Slow. Reluctant. "Yes." She closed her eyes. One blink, two. When she opened them again, they weren't angry. They were something worse. Wounded. "You did it after dinner?" I didn't have to answer. The guilt already curled in my posture, in the way I twisted the ring still in my fingers. Her eyes flicked to it, and her mouth pressed into a thin, trembling line. "I knew I hurt you," she said quietly. "I knew I crossed a line. But I didn't think you'd punish me like that." "I wasn't punishing you," I replied, and the words caught. "I was protecting something. Myself, my dignity, my years." She laughed once, short, breathless, bitter. "So you removed me from your future?" I winced. "It wasn't about the money," I said. "It never is, until it is," she snapped. "I wanted you to feel it." She blinked. "Feel what?" "What I felt. When you said those words, when you laughed, when you made me feel like a relic at my own daughter's table." Her shoulders dropped. Her anger didn't leave. It just folded inward. "I've given you everything," I said. "Time, years, my back, my hands. The woman you are now, she was shaped by me. And that night, you looked at me like a stranger, like some embarrassing artifact she turned away, walked to the sink, stared out the window as if the answers were etched on the glass. "I thought about calling you the next day," she murmured, "but I didn't think you'd want to hear from me." "And I didn't think you wanted to be my daughter anymore," I replied. Silence. Not the angry kind, the kind that builds a bridge if you're brave enough to walk across it. "I'm still your daughter," she said without turning around. "And I'm still your mother," I replied, softer now, even when I forget how to show it kindly. She turned to face me, leaning back against the counter. "I lost a baby," she said. "A job, a part of myself, but losing your trust? That was the one that undid me." I stepped forward, hands open, empty. "Then let's try again." Her lips parted, just slightly. "Try?" I nodded. "That's all we can ever do, isn't it? Try not to become the worst versions of ourselves." She didn't say anything for a moment, just studied me. Then she walked toward me, arms wrapping slowly around my frame like she wasn't sure if I'd shatter or pull away. I didn't do either. I held her. Her hair smelled like lavender. Her coat was still damp from the outside air. Her fingers gripped the back of my sweater like she was clinging to a raft in the middle of a storm. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. "I didn't think you'd really—" "I didn't either," I cut in. but grief makes you foolish. Pride makes you cruel." She pulled back just enough to look at me. "Is it too late to fix it?" I shook my head. "It's a pen stroke." "Then fix it." I nodded, lips pressed together, throat thick. "I'll get the folder." I moved slowly down the hall, past the old pictures, the bookshelf, the chair no one sat in anymore, into the study where the will had sat like an unspoken truth all these years. The light in the study was dim, filtered through drawn curtains. Dust hung in the air like tiny ghosts. I opened the drawer, reached inside. My fingers touched. Nothing. I blinked, crouched, reached again. Nothing but loose paper clips, a packet of stamps, and an empty envelope. No folder. I pulled the drawer all the way out, checked beneath it, behind it, around it. Gone. I turned around slowly, heart pounding harder than it should have. Meredith stood in the doorway, watching. "What is it?" she asked, brow furrowed. I looked at the empty drawer. "It's not here." "What do you mean it's not?" She stepped forward. "You said it was in the study." "It was." "I kept it there. Always." She reached in beside me, pawed through the drawer. "Maybe it slipped behind." "No," I said, the first hints of dread curling in my gut. "Someone moved it." She looked up at me, alarm in her eyes now mirroring mine. "Then who the hell has it?" My will was gone, like a part of my resolve. Disappeared. And in its place, a silence too thick to breathe through. I stood staring into the empty drawer, the edges of it suddenly feeling too wide, too deep. It had always been there, tucked beneath letters I couldn't throw away and stamps I never used. The folder was thick, impossible to miss, and yet now it was air. Meredith was still kneeling beside me, rifling through the desk drawers with the mechanical urgency of someone trying not to panic. She checked again as if the will might materialize if she just blinked differently. "It has to be somewhere," she said, pulling out old receipts, bank envelopes, faded birthday cards. "I don't misplace things like that," I replied, sharper than intended. My throat felt lined with thorns. She looked up. "Are you sure you didn't move it?" "I'm not senile," I snapped. Her face fell, and I regretted it instantly, but I didn't take it back. My heart was pounding too loud to soften. I stepped back from the desk and scanned the room. My eyes moved across the shelves, the old filing box under the window, the armchair Gerald used to sit in when balancing the checkbook. Everything looked undisturbed. "I haven't even opened that drawer since—" I trailed off, then shook my head. "Since the day I crossed you out." The silence that followed was taut. She stood slowly. "Okay, so either someone moved it, or someone took it." We stared at each other. There was no one else who came into the house regularly, just her. Occasionally a neighbor dropping off muffins or condolences. The hospice nurse came last winter, before she passed, and that was brief. "Maybe it got misplaced when you were cleaning," she offered gently now. "I haven't cleaned that desk in months. You know how I am with paper. If I touch one thing, I have to touch all of it, and then it becomes a project I never wanted to start." She nodded faintly. "Dad's system." We both glanced toward the filing cabinet. Gerald used to joke he trusted the cabinet more than the bank. His handwriting still lived on the manila folders, blocky and exacting. I opened the top drawer, the scent of old ink and paper rising like memory. It hit me harder than expected. The first folder was labeled House. The next, Medical. Then Legal. I flipped through each, carefully. But the will wasn't there, just old versions, yellowed with time. The latest draft was unmistakably missing. I looked at Meredith. No one else should have known it existed. Except you. Her brow furrowed. "You think I took it?" I stared at her. "No, but I think someone might have had reason to." We were quiet again, long enough that I could hear the clock in the hallway ticking like a heartbeat. Then, something occurred to me. "Wait." I turned and headed to the small drawer in the side table across the room. one I hadn't opened since spring. Inside was mostly junk, paper clips, loose stamps, a dried-out pen. But wedged at the bottom was a folded piece of paper, torn at the top like it had been ripped from something thicker. I unfolded it, my fingers already trembling. It was just a fragment, a single sentence. The ink faded, but unmistakably mine. My daughter Meredith Cartwright shall... I stared at it, a sliver of the original document, one that should never have been separated. "What is that?" Meredith asked behind me. I handed it to her slowly. She read it twice, then looked up, confused. "This is yours." "Yes, but it's torn." "Why would you—" I didn't. I took the paper back and examined the tear. It was uneven, jagged, like someone had yanked it from the stack in a hurry. Meredith folded her arms. So either someone took the will and tore this part out to leave a trace, or I did it and forgot, I said bitterly. She looked at me then, not with pity, but with something worse. Worry. I didn't want to be looked at like that, not by her. "I didn't lose it," I repeated. "It was taken." "Okay," she said softly, trying to steady the tension. "Then we find out who had access. And why." Her gaze moved around the room, pausing at the window, the back door, the hallway. She looked like she was calculating something. "Michael hasn't been here since Christmas," she murmured. I didn't say anything, but the thought took root. He'd always looked at my home like it was an asset, a future investment, and he'd sat awfully quiet that night at dinner, the night I felt most reduced, most exposed. "You said he doesn't know about the financial trouble," I said. "No," Meredith replied, "but he's noticed." I can tell the silence between us sharpened. "I need to find that will," I said. "Tonight." She nodded, but there was fear in her eyes now, not of me, of what we might find. She reached into the side table again, checking underneath, and froze. "Mom," she whispered, holding up something else. A second torn scrap, barely legible, but with 2 words intact. "Power of attorney." A scrap with her name, my handwriting, set my chest aflame with both shame and fierce longing. That paper held more than ink. It held the question neither of us could say aloud. How much trust is left between us? Meredith held the second scrap gently between her fingertips, like it might dissolve if she breathed too hard. Power of attorney. The words bled slightly, warped by time or maybe handling, like they'd been touched too many times by someone who didn't understand what they were holding. She handed it to me, slowly. I read it, even though I didn't need to. I'd written that will. That sentence. I knew its structure by heart, but seeing it fragmented like this, it felt like someone had torn a piece of my spine out. "I had this filed," I said, my voice quieter than I meant. "I kept everything in order. Gerald always said, if you don't leave clarity behind, you leave chaos." I listened. I did everything by the damn book. Meredith knelt beside the open drawer again, checking every crease and corner. Her silence was telling. It wasn't disbelief, it was fear. Fear that the truth was worse than we were letting ourselves imagine. "I didn't even know you had a power of attorney set up," she said, still searching. "You were named in it." I felt the shame trickle in then, slow, thick, unforgiving. Until I changed it. Along with the rest, her hands froze. "You gave someone else power of attorney?" "For a while." "Yes. Who?" I hesitated. "Mom." "Michael," I said flatly. The breath caught in her throat. "It was after your father died. You were barely functioning. He was the stable one. You were falling apart, and I thought..." My voice cracked. "I thought I was protecting both of us." She sat back on her heels, staring at the floor like it had betrayed her too. "So, let me get this straight," she said. "You removed me from the will. You gave him power of attorney, and now what? You think he's taken the documents?" "I don't know what I think," I said honestly. "All I know is the folder is gone, and 2 pieces of it are scattered across my house, like someone wants me to think I've lost my mind." She ran a hand through her hair. Her fingers were shaking. I didn't know how to console her. I wasn't even sure if I should. Instead, I sat down beside her. Our knees almost touched, but not quite. The kind of closeness that aches because it's not yet earned. I'm afraid, I admitted, more than I let on. Of the forgetting, of being invisible, of becoming this caricature of age people politely tolerate but don't listen to. She turned toward me slowly. Her eyes were raw but steady. I'm afraid too, she said, of losing you before I get the chance to really know you again, of watching you slip through the cracks of your own strength. You always seem so unshakable I forget you're human. I exhaled, a long shaky breath that felt like I hadn't taken it in months. There was silence again, but it was the kind that binds, not the kind that breaks. We gathered the torn scraps together and laid them out on the table. 3 fragments, barely a fraction of what once existed, but enough to hint at its architecture. My name, Meredith murmured, pointing. The word executor. The phrase in full confidence. That's your wording. I nodded. Gerald used to tease me about sounding like a lawyer. And now I sound like a fool with no proof of her own decisions. She reached for my hand, not dramatically, just instinctively. Her grip was warm, steady. I believe you, she said. I didn't deserve it. Not yet, but I clung to it anyway. There's only one place I haven't looked, I said. Suddenly, Meredith glanced at me. Where? The old study. You mean Dad's? I nodded. After he passed, I locked the door, kept the key tucked behind a loose plank under the hallway rug. I couldn't bear to walk in there, not while everything still smelled like him. Like cedar and ink and late nights spent building something that would outlast him. But you said you never used that room again, she said. I didn't. I stood, my knees cracking in protest. But someone might have. As I reached under the rug for the key, Meredith's phone buzzed on the table behind us. She checked the screen, then paled. It's Michael, she said, voice flat. He's asking if we've found the documents yet. I unlocked that dusty study and held my breath. Maybe I was opening old wounds, or maybe new ones. Some rooms don't just smell like time, they trap it. The key turned with a reluctant click, as if the lock had grown tired of guarding ghosts. When the door creaked open, the scent hit me first. Dust, cedar, dried ink, and the faint trace of Gerald's aftershave, long since evaporated from memory, but resurrected by the soft disturbance of air. The light switch took a few tries. The bulb flickering like it, too, wasn't ready to see again. The study bloomed to life in a dull amber hue, revealing the frozen world my husband left behind. Nothing had moved in here for years. His books still lined the walls, spines cracked from obsessive use. His writing desk was stacked with legal pads, capped pens, rubber bands curled like brittle question marks. The armchair near the window sagged in the same spot where he used to sit, reading late into the night while the world forgot about us. Meredith stepped in behind me, quieter than she'd been all evening. Her eyes scanned the room with reverence, as if she were trespassing in a sacred place. God, she whispered. It's like he's still here. My throat tightened. I didn't reply. I moved to the desk and began opening drawers with care. Most were filled with old ledgers, outdated tax folders, warranty manuals for appliances we no longer owned. A dried-out fountain pen rolled toward the edge of one as I rifled through papers. I caught it before it fell. I used to sneak in here when I was little, Meredith said softly, standing near the bookcase. He had a candy stash in that bottom drawer. I glanced. He thought I didn't know. You always knew, she smiled. But her smile faded when I opened the next drawer and paused. Tucked beneath a thin layer of yellowing receipts was a cream-colored envelope sealed, but with my name written in Gerald's handwriting across the front. Helen. Just that. No date, no greeting. My fingers hovered above it like it might burn. What is it? Meredith asked. Stepping closer, I picked it up. The envelope was thick, heavy. "It's from him," I said. "Your father." Meredith froze. I opened it, slowly, the seal breaking with a faint tear that sounded louder than it should have in that hushed room. Inside was a letter, 3 pages, folded neatly. I unfolded them, hands trembling as I held them to the light. "Helen, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to explain while I was alive. I'm sorry for that. I never liked loose ends, and this is the loosest one of all. I made changes to my will years ago without telling you. I was planning to revise it again, but didn't get to. I wanted to remove you from part of the estate, not because I stopped loving you, but because I began to suspect things I never had the courage to ask you outright. Things I thought maybe you'd admit when you were ready." I stopped reading. My lungs forgot how to work. Meredith stepped beside me, her brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" I couldn't speak yet. I read on. "I found the letter from Frank, the one you kept. I wasn't angry, just confused. Was it emotional? Was it something more? You never told me, and I didn't ask. But I couldn't get it out of my head. You changed after he died. We both did. But your silence grew sharper. I didn't know how to reach you anymore. My hands shook. The room tilted slightly. Frank, my childhood friend, my brief complication. But nothing had happened. Not really, just letters. One moment of closeness after grief swallowed us both. It never crossed the line. Gerald had found that and never said a word. Meredith was watching me now, expression unreadable. I skipped to the end of the letter. "I never intended to punish you, Helen, but I couldn't leave everything unresolved. If the documents are missing, it means I hesitated. Maybe that means I still trusted you. Maybe love doesn't need clarity, just time. Yours always, Gerald." I sat down, hard. The chair groaned beneath me. My ears buzzed with the weight of the letter. "He thought you cheated," Meredith said, her voice small. "No," I whispered. "He thought I might have? That I wasn't telling him something. Were you?" I looked up at her, not in the way he feared, but maybe in the way that matters. I buried a part of myself after Frank died. Gerald felt it, and I never let him in. We sat with that. The idea that trust, once cracked, could echo through generations. "That's why he changed the will," I said. "Not to disinherit me fully, but to rewrite our story on his own terms." Meredith stepped forward and gently took the letter from my lap. Her fingers brushed mine. "He kept it here, which means maybe the original will is still somewhere in this room." She began scanning the shelves, the boxes tucked underneath, the floorboard seams, and then, just as I moved to check beneath the armchair, there was a knock at the front door. 3 slow, heavy raps. We both froze. Meredith straightened. "Who would—" Then she looked down at her phone. Her eyes widened. "It's Michael's father," she said. "He just texted. He's here." Before I could rise, another knock came, louder this time. And with it, a voice from the hallway. "Helen, we need to talk. Now." The knock echoed with unexpected relief. A man I barely welcomed held something I truly needed. Sometimes the person you least expect to show up is the only one who knows what to say. Meredith opened the door before I could stand, and there he was, Michael's father, Winston Cartwright. Always so formal, always just a little too polished. A man who'd once looked at my dinner rolls and said, "Not quite flaky enough." A man who called me Helen like it was a diagnosis. But tonight, something was different. He didn't fill the doorway with self-importance. He didn't scan the house with veiled critique. He stepped in quietly, shoulders hunched slightly, his trench coat clinging to him like it too, had taken on the weight of this visit. He held a file folder in his hands, dark green, tattered at the corners. My stomach dropped. "Where did you get that?" I asked, stepping into the hallway. He looked at me, Not directly, but with that kind of soft-eyed guilt men rarely let themselves wear in public. "I need to explain," he said. Meredith stepped aside, arms crossed tightly across her chest. I could see the muscle in her jaw twitching. She was waiting for me to throw him out, or yell, but I didn't. I motioned toward the dining room. "Sit down." He did, carefully, placing the folder on the table like it was something sacred. It looked exactly like my will, creased in the middle, initials scrawled across the tab in my familiar black pen. I recognized the ink smudges near the top where I'd set down my teacup once. This was it. He rested his hands over it, breathing slowly. "I found this on the floor near the entry 2 days after your dinner," he said. I blinked. That doesn't make sense. I didn't touch it after I put it in the drawer. He looked at Meredith. She shook her head. "I never moved it." I swear, Winston nodded. "That's why I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure if it was accidental or if someone dropped it intentionally, but when I opened it—" "You opened it?" I snapped. He flinched, then nodded. "Yes. I know I shouldn't have, but I was looking for answers. Michael's been acting erratic, guarded. He said things that didn't add up. I thought maybe he'd tampered with something." I sank into the chair across from him. "Did he?" "I don't know," he said. "But I knew if I handed this to him first, it might disappear again. And after reading what you'd written, the changes, the strike-throughs, I thought maybe keeping it for a few days was safer." "You thought stealing my legal documents was safer?" I asked, voice sharp. He winced. "I thought protecting your legacy was more important than honoring your privacy." The silence in the room stretched. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, "but I came here because I believe this," he tapped the folder, "belongs to you, and because I think you and Meredith deserve the truth." Without interference, I looked at Meredith. Her arms were still crossed, but her shoulders had softened. "I've never heard you talk like this," she said to him quietly. "I've never had reason to," Winston replied. "Until now." He slid the folder across the table. I took it, opened it. The will was intact. My name, my signature. The clauses I remembered. The cross-out still slicing through Meredith's name like a scar. And at the back, a new page. A codicil, written in pen. Dated the day after the dinner. I hadn't written it. I looked up at Winston. "You added something," I said. He nodded. "Just one word." I turned to the last line. "Codicil, forgive." My throat closed. "I didn't know if it would hold legal weight," he said, "but I hoped it might hold emotional weight." Meredith was crying now, quietly. She stepped forward, sat beside me, and placed her hand over mine. Winston rose. "I've done enough meddling," he said. "I'll leave you two." He turned to go. "Wait," I said. He paused. "Why now? Why help me after all these years of cold Sunday brunches and quiet judgment?" He looked back at me, eyes hollow and tired. "Because I spent half my life thinking control was the same as love," he said, "and I watched it ruin every relationship I had. I saw the same pattern starting with my son. I don't want that for Meredith, or for you." And with that, he walked out the front door and into the rain without taking an umbrella. Meredith and I sat in silence, the codicil between us. She reached over and tapped the word. "I don't know if I've earned that yet," she said. "Neither have I whispered. I closed the folder slowly, then paused. A slip of paper had fallen out from between the pages, one I hadn't written. On it, a single sentence in unfamiliar handwriting. "This isn't the only version." He handed me the pages, my own words, but softer now. And at the end, that single codicil, "Forgive," written in someone else's hand but echoing through mine like an overdue confession. The slip of paper still lay on the table, the ink curling slightly at the edges as if the sentence had been whispered instead of written. "This isn't the only version." I traced the words with the tip of my finger, not yet ready to lift them, let alone believe them. Meredith sat beside me, watching the lines on my face more intently than the ones on the page. "Do you think it's Michael's handwriting?" she asked, voice low. "No," I said after a moment. "This was a woman's hand." She raised an eyebrow. "Someone careful, patient, possibly a paralegal. This isn't rushed, it's recorded. It knows it's being read." A flash of understanding crossed her face. Then the other version, if it exists, was made properly. I nodded, but I wasn't ready to chase it yet. Not when the document in front of me was enough to split me open. I unfolded the will again, now familiar yet stranger. My own sentences stared back at me, concrete, cool, and final. Except now, at the bottom of the final page, beneath the last formal clause, was a single handwritten addition. Codicil. Forgive. A, my initials, not my handwriting. Whoever wrote it had done so in my stead, a gesture, a placeholder, but the meaning was unmistakable. I looked over at Meredith, whose hands were clasped in her lap as if she were preparing for a verdict. "I don't remember writing that," I said. "You didn't. But I remember feeling it, or almost feeling it." She gave me a ghost of a smile. "That counts." Winston had returned to the doorway, hovering like a man uncertain of whether he belonged. He hadn't removed his coat nor stepped any farther in than necessary, and yet he waited. Not for permission, for peace. "I should go," he said. I looked up at him. "Stay." He blinked as if I'd startled him. "You brought this back," I said, motioning to the will. "You brought me back." "You might as well see it through." He stepped inside slowly, quietly taking the seat opposite me. For once, he didn't cross his legs or adjust his cuffs. He simply sat. The room fell into that peculiar kind of stillness reserved for endings, ones that don't feel like losses. I smoothed the pages again, this time seeing them not just as legal documents, but as the story of my voice. Every clause, every line break was me trying to control how I would be remembered. But what legacy is written without contradiction, without mess? "I wrote this after that dinner," I said aloud, "after I felt humiliated, reduced, forgotten, not by strangers, but by my own blood." Meredith lowered her gaze. "But I also wrote it out of fear," I continued, "fear that I was already a ghost in your lives, that my wrinkles were the only thing anyone noticed." "You're not a ghost," she whispered. I turned to her. "Then why did you laugh?" Her answer came slowly, measured. "Because I was scared, too, of what it means to watch you fade, and maybe because if I could laugh at it, I didn't have to feel how close we're all getting to losing each other." That truth settled on the table between us like an heirloom. "I've been too proud," I admitted. "Pride is heavy. Heavier than grief." Sometimes Winston cleared his throat gently. "Pride built this family. But forgiveness might be what keeps it standing." I nodded once, and in that nod, I felt the last resistance in me dissolve. "Then let's revise the story." I took a pen, my pen, Gerald's old one, and reached the bottom of the page. Beneath the codicil that wasn't mine, I wrote 2 words in deliberate strokes. "I agree." And then, just below, I added, "Let her have the home, and the memories that live inside it." Meredith's breath hitched. She said nothing, but reached over and for the first time in years, held my hand like a daughter who remembered who she was before the world made her careful. Winston looked away as if to give us privacy without leaving. My gaze moved around the room, faded curtains, dusty trim, family photos too small for the frames. This house had held my grief, my joy, my mistakes. It would hold hers next, and that was legacy enough. I folded the will carefully, smoothed the crease, and pressed it closed. But before I could speak again, I hesitated. There was one more truth I hadn't told. I looked at Meredith and said quietly, "There's something you should know about your father." I stood by the window, the will in my shaking hands, and spoke what I hadn't dared all evening. Some truths aren't heavy because they're hidden. They're heavy because they've been carried too long. The rain had stopped. Outside the window, the world glistened like it had been rinsed clean. I stood there, the will folded tight in my hand, not clenched, just held. Like something delicate I was finally ready to let go of. My palm ached from how long I'd been gripping it, but the ache was honest, earned. Meredith sat at the table behind me, her tea gone cold again. She hadn't pressed me after those last words. "There's something you should know about your father." She waited, still and open, not expectant, just willing. Winston had gone, quietly, without fanfare. He'd nodded once at me, once at her, and disappeared into the night like someone who finally understood how not to take up space. The house was still again, not silent, just still. The kind of quiet you earn after a storm passes. I turned from the window, looked at her, and let it out. "Your father loved you more than he knew how to say. But he didn't trust me in the end." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" I walked back to the table, slowly, every step a breath. "I told you about the letter, about Frank, about the doubts. What I didn't tell you is that your father didn't rewrite the will just to protect himself. He rewrote it because he thought I might leave everything to someone else entirely." "Who?" I took a breath. "You?" She blinked. "But I'm already in it. He thought I'd give everything to you. That I'd cut out his legacy, his balance, that I'd act on guilt or love or maybe spite and shift the weight too far." She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "So he did it first." I nodded. "He died before he could finish undoing it." Her eyes dropped to the will in my hand. "And now?" she asked. "I've rewritten it. For real this time. Not out of fear, not out of shame, just clarity." Her lips parted. "And what does it say?" "It says what it always should have," I replied. "That love doesn't divide the pie. It bakes the whole thing." She smiled, eyes wet. "That's not very legal." "No," I said, "but it's real." I placed the will down in front of her, smoothed it flat, and then finally sat across from her. Really sat, with my back no longer tight with tension, my shoulders lowered, my breath full. "I want to say something," I said, my voice calm but thick. She nodded, folded her hands together, and waited. "I am not proud of everything I did. I am proud of who I became despite it. But I carried too much silence, too much restraint. I thought love meant endurance. But I realize now, love is presence. It's messy and loud and awkward, but it's seen." She covered her mouth with her hand, not to stifle a sob, just to steady herself. "I don't want to die being remembered only as the woman who raised you with steel," I continued. "I want to be remembered as the woman who heard you." "Who let herself be heard. You do," she said quietly. "Right now, you do." I reached across the table, and this time, she didn't just meet my hand, she wrapped both of hers around it and pulled me forward gently, like I might disappear if she didn't. I let myself lean in. We didn't cry, not fully. We didn't collapse into cinematic forgiveness. We just breathed together, present, seen. And in that breath, something eased. The years, the regrets, the missed dinners and misunderstood jokes. They didn't vanish, but they softened. She stood and came to my side, knelt beside me like she used to when I had migraines, when I was too tired to move but too proud to admit it. Her head rested lightly against my shoulder. "I'm scared of losing you," she whispered. "You're not," I said. "You're finally finding me." Outside, the clouds broke fully, letting in a stretch of silver moonlight across the living room rug. It looked like a path. "Do you think Dad knew?" she asked after a while. "Knew what?" "That we'd end up here." Like this, I smiled faintly. He always believed endings wrote themselves. But I think Maybe he left us just enough ink to write our own." She laughed, real, soft, grateful. I pressed the will back into the folder, the codicil still tucked in place, my new line now inked beneath it like a quiet vow. We sat in silence, not because we'd run out of things to say, but because we didn't need words anymore. Legacy, I realized, isn't just money or houses or names on a document. It's presence, witness, continuity. It's the echo of being seen. I looked out the window once more, the light rising soft and clean, and in a whisper only the walls could hear, I said aloud, "I am seen again."